Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast. It's Sunday, the 21st of July. It's show number 447. And in the news today, we have images released of the bike and rider who are suspects in the Dalston shooting I reported on a couple of months ago. 3 dead, sadly, in a head-on bike crash at a Faro motorcycle festival. In Kenya, though, 2 motorcyclists have been shot dead and bikes have been burned in an anti-government demonstration. And £10,000 worth of damage has been caused to a Dundee golf course. I've spelt that C-A-U-S-E, haven't I? And it should be C-O-U-R-S-E, caused by nuisance bikers. But a rider who lost his leg in a crash has won the strongest disabled man competition in England. More on that story. And we have a couple of bikes to talk about. The Gryffin 450, which is a kind of retro-enduro. It comes as a price because it's hand-built, basically. And at the other end of the spectrum is Royal Enfield's Guerrilla, which is a very similar bike in some ways, but priced to compete for the mass market. And then finally today, we'll look at the realities of the Baja CNG-fuelled bike. I've misspelled that as well. It should have another J on the end, I notice. Anyway, we'll have a look at that and talk about the limitations of compressed natural gas as a power source. So settle yourselves down for the next 30-40 minutes while I run through all those stories for you today. Don't forget, if you have a comment, if you have a question, anything you want to ask, do fire away. I will always try to get back to you during the show if I possibly can, but if I can't reach out to you, I hate that expression. Why did I say it? If I get back to the show, I will come back to you after it. Right, okay. So on with the show then. Right, first thing to talk about, a bit of housekeeping really. Now, as you probably know, I'm presenting a paper, I'm very pleased to say, on the science of being seen at the International Journal of Motorcycle Studies conference at Nottingham University in a few days' time. Now, I'm not part of a university or any other institution, of course, so I've had to cover my attendance costs for myself. So I have rather cheekily asked for people's support on this because it really is an unmissable opportunity to get science of being seen out to a very interesting audience, as sort of specialists in motorcycle safety, people who are simply keen motorcyclists themselves and motorcycle activists. But anyway, it's an international audience, basically. So let me say, first of all, a very special thank you to the people who have chipped in to support me with my costs here. Paul, Damo, Mad Cockney, Malk, Duncan, John, Kevin, I've got Duncan and Malk up there twice, and Anonymous. But thank you all very, very much indeed. It's much appreciated that you have been able to help out. Right, okay, next piece of news. Now, as you probably know, Facebook has been causing me some grief recently. Now, the first thing I hope is that the problems which led to Facebook detecting my streaming software as a, I forget what the exact term was, something about a bad actor or something. Anyway, they thought it was an attempt to spam the social media site, and what it did was it left me banned personally, so I couldn't post for a couple of days, and possibly facing a full-on account to deletion. Now, fortunately, my one appeal, I'm only allowed one appeal apparently, Facebook were very keen on telling me that, succeeded. And I hope the problems have now been fixed. So I trust that this show is now going out live on Facebook, as well as where it has been for the last month or so on YouTube. Now, the second issue with Facebook I have recently had to report is that my supporters on Facebook have shared my posts to their friends. And then what happened was those posts were removed, and Facebook then made threats of action against my supporters for attempting to gain likes. which I think is outrageous. Anyway, it seems others have had exactly the same issues with posts shared, then removed by Facebook, and threats issued. So I have seen this suggested as a workaround. When you get the notification that the post that you shared has been removed, there is a take action option apparently on the bottom of it. Now, I haven't seen the exact notification, so I can't swear to this, but this is what I have been told. What you do as the sharing person is you select the "you misunderstood the post" option, followed by "it's an important option." Now, if you do this, it seems Facebook then check it manually, and it seems others have found that the shared post has been restored. But of course, there is an easier way around all this sharing posts, and it's basically to go to my Substack newsletter. If you haven't joined Substack already, I recommend that you do that, because the newsletter goes out once a week. I don't spam you with it and junk in it. It's a list of links to my previous week's posts. There's a little bit of information about my training courses in there, and there's usually a short article about something I found interesting in the prior week. So basically, you can you can subscribe to that, and then if you want to share the post, you can just share the newsletter with somebody and they can pick it out themselves. Or if you want to share just the single post and you don't want to go to the Substack newsletter, you can always do it via my Coffee creator page. So no ads, no spam, just the content via Substack or Coffee. Either way, you get to share the post with a lot less personal hassle than you tend to get from Facebook. Right, anyway, on with the weather. Now, a ridge of high pressure across the UK today means that it's going to be a largely dry day. Mix of sun and cloud. It's cloudy here at the moment, but fairly bright. Temperatures have dropped back to the seasonal norm, as I predicted last show. Showers will be few and far between today, and if there are any, it's most likely to be out on the western facing coasts. But outbreaks of showery rain will move across Northern Ireland during the afternoon and then spread into North Wales, Cumbria, and southern Scotland over the course of the evening. Now, the Monday sees this rain pretty much broken up by then, but it will be moving into eastern Scotland, where a few could see some thundery downpours. Elsewhere, it will be dry, rather cloudy, and breezy in the south on Monday. Tuesday is expected to stay largely dry, but with more sunny spells and just the chance of an odd afternoon shower in the east. And then again, it stays dry for most on Wednesday, but cloud and rain likely to arrive in the west later in the day. So not too bad for riding a motorcycle, dry across most of the country, but the far north gets a bit of rain then. Okay, on to motorcycling news from around the world. Now, the first thing is the story from Dalston in London about the shooting that happened back on Wednesday, the 29th of May, which left 3 men injured and a 9-year-old girl who remains sadly in a critical condition. The suspect's motorcyclist was a Ducati Monster with a white body, red chassis and red wheels. It was stolen from a Wembley property in 2021. At the time of the shooting, the registration plate DP21OXY was on the bike. Now, detectives have now released some new images of the motorcycle, which they are working to trace. This one here was taken just before the incident occurred, and 2 others were captured post incident. Now, Detective Chief Superintendent James Conway, he's the lead for policing in Hackney, said that he's making a renewed appeal for information because, unfortunately, there have been no arrests at the moment. And he said that at this time, a critical line of inquiry has been the potential links to Turkish originating organised crime networks. He also said he believes the motorcycle has been in the Peckham and Crystal Palace area. So anybody who saw this bike or can help them identify the rider is asked to contact police as soon as they can. And what they say is that whoever this person is, they're dangerous and must be removed from our streets. Now, as I say, sadly, the 9-year-old remains critical in hospital but stable, but she's likely to have suffered life-changing injuries, which is very sad. The 3 men have been discharged. Right, okay, so on with another sad story. Now, this is from Portugal. 2 men and a young woman died on Friday evening in a head-on collision between 2 motorbikes close to the site of Faro's ongoing Bikers Festival, and it was believed that they were both at the festival themselves. Now, according to police, quote, the origin was a poorly effected overtaking maneuver by one of the drivers who collided with the other motorbike, which was travelling in the opposite direction. Both the men, aged 31 and 49, were killed outright. The woman, who was a pillion passenger on one of the bikes, was given CPR at the scene and transported to Faro Hospital, but sadly she died from her injuries too. The victims have not yet been identified, but police have redoubled appeals for caution. In events like these, the volume of traffic is always greater and people should drive at reduced speed, said Major Anjos of the local police. Now, he also warned against bikers drinking alcohol and then riding. And I'm afraid this story actually, there are crashes associated with big bike groups and festivals. I can recall going to the Ball d'Or 24-hour race, and on the road down towards Bandol Beach, there were casualty dressing stations all up and down that road because there were so many motorcycle crashes on that road. Now, another story, sadly, 2 people were shot dead and 5 motorcycles were torched during anti-government demonstrations in Malongo Township in Kenya. Now, the 2 men were allegedly shot by the police as the police deployed to, quote, quell the demonstrations. They were pronounced dead on a hospital, at a local hospital to which they were taken by members of the public. The situation was said to be still tense that evening, but officers were present endeavouring to suppress the rioters and restore normalcy. Fortunately, Kenya's seen a lot of unrest recently with a lot of anti-government protests across the country, and they have been countered by pro-government demonstrators. At least 5 people have been shot dead. Meanwhile, up in Scotland, nuisance bikers on a quad bike and 2 motorcycles have caused an estimated £10,000 worth of damage at the Caird Park golf course, which is Dundee's only public course. Now, they rode over a temporary green, which is being used after prior damage to the 11th hole, as well as greens and fairways on the 11th, 17th and 18th holes. They're all torn up with tyre marks. Police are looking for 4 people on the red quad bike and 2 motorcycles. This incident happened around 6 p.m. last Thursday. The course is one of Dundee's 3 visitor attractions that is actually under threat of closure to save Dundee City Council £500,000 a year. So having to spend money actually putting the course back together won't help issues. I kind of despair at people who do things like this. You may want to go and ride your bike somewhere, but over a public golf course, and basically destroying other people's fun activities, I think is just unacceptable. All right, okay. Don't forget, if you wouldn't be, whoops, that's the wrong button. I'll come back to that one. If you would be so kind, press the like and subscribe buttons. All this, of course, helps get the channel noticed. I already have quite a few subscribers to my Facebook page, but I've just hit 500 subscribers on YouTube, so I'm aiming for 1,000 before the end of the year. So tell your biking buddies about the 11s too. Get them to come along. I'm sure they'll find something interesting to read. Right, okay, so Hampshire man who had his leg amputated following a motorcycle crash has won England's Strongest Disabled Man contest. Now, Scott Endersby, he was from Hamble. He was 26 when he lost control of his motorcycle, taking evasive action, avoiding a car, and unfortunately crashed into a lamppost. This was back in April 2018. So he had a series of operations, but eventually decided that he would be better having his leg amputated. So he was 6 years on he has won this trophy for England's strongest disabled man, now 32. He said, I was lost for words. I wasn't really expecting it. I'm still taking it in. Now, he got a prosthetic leg in 2019 and he started training again. And what he said was he just needed to rebuild. As he quote, I had got quite fat. Scott said, I'd been to the gym my whole life, started going when I left school and had never really stopped since then. So the following year, 2020, he found out about this competition for England's strongest disabled man and started working towards an entry. Last year, he came third. Having won the competition this year, he's now aiming to compete in the title of Britain's strongest man. So hats off to him, and he's wishing him good luck with that. Right, okay. So let's move on rapidly. It's a fairly short show today, and let's have a look at some bikes. Now, I've got a pair of outwardly similar motorcycles for you to enjoy today, but they have a wide variation in price. One is more or less hand produced, the other aimed at the mass market. One's from the USA and one from India. So let's start with the first one. Let's have a look at the Janus Gryffin 450. And if I've got the right photo up, there it is. There we go, that's the bike. Now let me zoom in on that so you can see a little bit more clearly. This is the, as I say, the Janus Gryffin 450. Janus are based in Goshen in Indiana. They're founded in 2011 and they have a range of 250 and 450 singles, and they are naked modern retros. Now, as you can see, the Gryffin here is described as an off-road minded bike. Interestingly, if you look at the front end of it, you'll see that it has a rather unconventional front end to the motorcycle. It's actually a pair of leading link forks with the exposed springers there. So the machine gets a pair of twin shocks at the rear, and it gets a seat height of 32 inches, 83 centimeters. You get 5.5 inches, 140 millimeters of suspension travel, and a 21-inch front wheel, 17-inch rear. Both spokes, both fitted with knobbly tires. The bike it's based on is their Halcyon. We'll have a look at that in a minute. And it's claimed to be 13.6 kilograms lighter. Dry weight of 149.7 kilograms, which, if my mental maths is right, is about 330 pounds. Now, up front, you get a twin piston Brembo floating caliper, so it should pull the lightweight machine up fairly quickly, and that's matched to a single rear disc. You do get a small bash plate under the motor, which is a 445cc single overhead cam, 4-valve, 4-stroke single, putting out a fairly modest 30 horsepower at 7,500 RPM, which gives the bike a maximum speed of around 90 miles per hour. Now, at the rear, you get a fairly robust looking optional rack. There it is. Appears to have built-in pannier support, but only on the right for some reason. The fuel tank, which is larger than on the Halcyon, which we'll look at in just a moment, though it still holds only 2.2 US gallons, which according to my calculator says 8 litres, just over 8 litres, or rather less than 2 gallons UK. The bike should, I would imagine, do 65 miles to the gallon, so you probably got a range of about 120, 130 miles on it, something like that. But to be honest, I could live without that brown seat. Okay, so which is the bike it was derived from? Well, it's this one here. I believe I've shown you this one before. This is the Halcyon 450. It's a kind of weird, well, you can see a 1920s sort of replica with that leading link fork with those exposed springs, very similar soft tail rear end as opposed to the twin shocks on the off-road bike, and you get that sprung sort of bicycle saddle as well. And that tank, well, it looks like it could have come straight off an early 1900s bike, doesn't it? Now, the motor itself, you may, if you are a fan of Hondas, you may recognize that. It looks very similar to some of the 4-valve Honda motors. It's actually sourced from SWM, who are technically an Italian company, but they are actually owned by the Chinese Shinarei group. And as I say, the motor appears to be a clone of a Honda design. Now, to my mind, the air and oil-cooled motor actually looks somewhat out of place on this particular classic style machine. It just looks too modern, doesn't it? But it actually works, I think, fairly well in the off-road Gryffin. Anyway, each Janus machine built to order, and as well as having this handmade, hand-formed tank, you also get the hand-formed, hand-rolled mudguards. The exhaust's also hand-built, and the forks and the chassis are also put together by hand. Naturally, the graphics and pinstripes are hand painted, and that accounts for the price. In the US, the off-road machine is $13,495 US, which I guess, if you're looking at a handmade bike, is actually fairly reasonable. Now, there is actually talk of bringing these bikes to the UK. If that happens, I would guess at the usual sort of one-to-one exchange rate when you import anything from the US to the UK, means that the bike will probably go on the market at around £13,500. If it does come to the UK, I will let you know. Let me know what you think of that. I think it's quite an interesting machine. We have Christine, we have Aaron, and we have Kevin all looking in. Good morning to you all. Now, let's move on to our second bike of the day. And it is the not very secret Royal Enfield Guerrilla 450. This is at the other end of the price spectrum to the one that we've just seen from Janus, and it's priced to go head to head with the newish pair of Triumph 400s. Now, the bike we saw here was out on the sort of doing the usual round of the leaked spy shots to the press. It's now actually on the market. It's definitely coming to the UK, and it will come at with 3 spec levels too, and it'll be priced between £4,850 and £5,050 at the launch, which makes it actually a little bit cheaper than the Triumphs. Now, the machine is, according to Royal Enfield, designed as a premium modern roadster. Now, with all the adventure bike equipment stripped off the original bike, you get right way up forks at the front, replacing the Himalayan's upside down front end. You also get road oriented 17-inch cast wheels front and rear rather than the spoked wheels on the Himalayan. Tires are in a 1270 and 1660 pair of sizes, which should make for plenty of quality tire choices. Actually, at the moment they have Indian made Seat grip tires, which I'm sure a lot of people won't trust too much. I don't know how good they are. I have never tried them. ABS is standard, of course, working on twin piston caliper at the front, single piston caliper at the rear. There is a smaller 11-litre fuel tank than on the Himalayan, and that mates with the revised bodywork and a one-piece stepped dual seat. The result, to my mind, is actually a rather attractive looking modern roadster, even with the LED headlight. Now, let's have a quick look at the motor itself. Let's zoom in on that. It's based on the same 452 single-cylinder Sherpa engine that appeared in the 450 Himalayan, and it drops the bike straight into that increasingly hotly competitive A2 license category. It's another overhead cam 4-stroke, this time liquid cooled, fuel injected, with a 4-valve head, and the power figure is a bit up on the bike I've just talked about. It's 40 PS at 8,000 RPM. Now, despite a slightly over square bore and stroke, peak torque still comes in fairly low, 40 Newton meters, 29.5 pound-feet at 5,500 RPM, and it's said that 85% of the torque arrives from as low as 3,000 RPM, so that should make the bike easy to ride in traffic. The bike gets a 6-speed gearbox. You also get an assist and slipper clutch unit and ride-by-wire throttle, which allows the machine to have 2 riding modes. You get an eco setting and a performance choice too. The engine sits in the same steel tubular rear monoshock frame as the Himalayan, but the engine's used as a stress member, of course. But the Guerrilla does get a revised rear subframe. Now, fueled up, the machine weighs 185 kilograms, which, if my mental maths is right, is around about 370 plus 37, just over 400 pounds. So it's 15 kilograms heavier than the 170 kilos quoted for the Speed 400. Now, the 850 pound version, dubbed the analog, has a simple smoke silver color screen, and heavens be praised, it actually has an analog speedo. I really do prefer them to the digital speedos. For the additional information, which we all need now, there's an LCD inset into the round sort of binnacle, and there is a secondary 4-inch unit which carries the tripper navigation, which can be chosen as an option. The other 2 versions are the Dash and my favorite, the Flash. They get alternative color schemes, and they get a round TFT readout, which, having looked at it, doesn't really float my boat. I don't think it's as clear as the analog one. One other design fail, which you can't quite see from here, but I did talk about previously with the Himalayan, is that the rear indicators integrate the brake lights into them. So there is no separate brake light. Now, I really don't like that. I suspect many riders would actually be fairly quick to fit a separate tail and brake unit. Arguably the brake light is the most important light we have on a motorcycle, because it tells other people that we're slowing down, and drivers behind us actually expect to see a brake light. It'll take them a moment to look at our indicators lighting up red, particularly if we're signaling at the same time, and figuring out that we're actually braking and indicating. So I'm really not convinced by these lights. I followed the machine with this integrated system, and I think it was far from effective in daylight, and I suspect it would be really confusing at night. However, I have to say I rather like that color scheme. I think that is rather attractive. Anyway, delivery to UK dealers expected later this summer. Out in India, where the machine is made, by the way, the bike comes in at just under £2,200. So we do pay quite a premium for shipping the thing over here. Right. Kevin has said that he would rather walk than ride the Janus 450. Whoops, I've gone too far past. That's the Halcyon. That's the Janus. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it sort of has a bit of a Steve McQueen look to it. I guess that's a fairly acquired taste, but anyway, hey ho. That's what we're looking at this morning. I quite like those 2 bikes, but I do actually rather like that blue Enfield. Anyway, on to the final part of today. Don't forget, check out the latest videos in my 60-second safety, 60-second science series. I just put a new 60-second safety video up this week. The idea is that they all offer you really useful information, but in a quick to watch, easy to digest format, which is a little bit more meaningful than the YouTube quickies that you see so often. Right. Okay, so on to today's final item. I'm going to look at another Indian motorcycle, but this time it's the Baja CNG compressed natural gas fueled bike. Now, if you read up on feasibility studies on alternative fuels, you'll find that, quote, the use of compressed natural gas, CNG, as a transport fuel is a mature technology and widely used in parts of the world. Although compressed natural gas is a fossil fuel, it's the cleanest burning fuel at the moment in terms of NOx and soot. Particulate matter, in other words, emissions. Now, that's a quoted item that comes direct from a document on the UN's Climate Technology Centre webpage. Now, the article goes on to explain that CNG passenger vehicles emit 5 to 10% less CO2 than comparable gasoline-powered passenger vehicles, but they say there is no benefit over diesel-powered cars in terms of CO2 emissions. Basically, what this means is that you burn the gas, and it's slightly more efficient to burn it. You get slightly more energy than you do from equivalent amount of petrol, but about the same as you do from a diesel car. And that's why you get the same amount of diesel CO2 emissions as you do from a CNG vehicle. But the big plus over a diesel is that NOx and particulate emissions from CNG powered vehicles are substantially lower. So switching a city bus or a city truck to CNG can improve local air quality. But remember, we don't get any reduction in greenhouse gas CO2. There is also what's called a well-to-wheel benefit. When you take into consideration the need to extract and refine fuels, the corresponding CO2 emissions of natural gas are much lower than they are for either gasoline or diesel. So that is a benefit in terms of greenhouse gases. Those are the pluses we hear a lot about, but it's not all roses. Now, first things first, if you retrofit a gasoline-powered vehicle for CNG, then usually what you get is a vehicle that's not as efficient as the original gasoline-powered vehicle. And also retrofitted vehicles have higher emissions of NOx and particulate matter soot. So basically sticking a CNG tank onto a bike which was designed to run on petrol is not going to be particularly a great idea. And the second problem, of course, with CNG powered vehicles is the fuel storage. Where are you going to put it? Cars usually require the spare wheel, if you have one, of course, to be removed to fit the fuel tank. But even so, they typically have around half the range of a conventionally fueled vehicle. We'll see in a moment how this has affected the Bajaj design. The storage issue isn't restricted to the vehicle either. The investment costs for a natural gas refueling station are significantly higher than for liquid fuels. And what that has meant is there has been poor market penetration. The high costs mean that CNG refueling stations will only be installed when there is sufficient demand. But consumers, of course, are only likely to purchase a CNG powered vehicle when they're confident they can refuel it. So it's a catch-22 there. Now, over to the bike then. Some months back, I reported that Bajaj were going to take advantage of the quote, inverted commas, special relationship that exists currently between Russia and India, which has seen India taking advantage of the embargo on worldwide sales of Russian natural gas to import it for themselves very cheaply. And so Bajaj had the idea of a compressed natural gas powered bike that could save commuters money on the cost of their fuel. And presumably, of course, it could net Bajaj an extra chunk of the 100,000 motorcycles that are sold each month in India. So let's have a look at the problems. Here is the tank. Now you'll see that this is the seat off on the Bajaj Freedom 125, which is a dual fuel machine. I'll come on to that in just a moment, but you can see here how the tank has been installed under the seat, and you can see there appear to be some fairly significant modifications to the bike to get it to fit the frame itself. That looks like it has been cut and shut with that sort of top rail wrapping partly round the cylinder there. The battery, you can also see, has been sort of repositioned to over the top of the rear mudguard there. Now the bike has a starting price of a very modest $1,317 or that's the equivalent price, of course, in India. And Bajaj claim riders can reduce their riding costs by 50% when running on CNG. and presumably, as I say, that's nothing to do with the relative efficiency of the two fuels. That is simply down to the fact that CNG is very cheap in India at the moment. So powered by gas, the bike has a range of 124 miles, and it can do that's 62 miles or 100 kilometers just over per kilogram of CNG. Now, running on gas, the 125 engine produces 9.3 horsepower, which gives the bike a top speed of 56 miles per hour. So that'll be fine for commuting, but it's hardly a high performance bike. Now, when they launched the machine, they explained that the cylinder has been kept small to maintain, quote, a certain level of appeal to the motorcycle's design and to maintain compact proportions, and probably more importantly, to keep the weight manageable. To hold just 2 kilograms of natural gas, the cylinder itself weighs 18 kilograms. And with the seat off, the problem is fairly obvious that the cylinder there takes up a huge amount of space under the seat. But it also appears, if you look at this picture here, that the seat has had to be raised to clear the tank. Now, fitting a larger tank would obviously lead to further compromises to the motorcycle's already comparatively high curb weight of 149 kilograms, 330 pounds, which is quite a lot for a 125. Now, Bajaj say they're going to explore other ways to decrease the motorcycle's weight. They say they could be using composite materials, which would allow a bigger, heavier, long-range tank to be fitted. But if you're starting to use composites on a bike costing $1,300 US, it's probably going to be more expensive too. Now, there are also limits to the pressure of the gas that's being dispensed. Bajaj are apparently requesting gas to be delivered at a higher pressure, which would allow them to get more into the tank, and that would increase range. But they also say this would actually require a new tank. I kind of wonder why that they didn't then design the tank to carry the heavier pressure already. Anyway, never mind. There's a third problem. Of course, the CNG is not universally available, and apparently it takes some time to fill the tank too. A bit surprised by that. I kind of thought you'd probably plug it in and turn a knob somewhere, and the empty tank would be refilled. Anyway, because of the limited range of the gas, the bike has a 2-litre auxiliary gasoline tank, so riders can switch to petrol when they cannot find a filling station for gas. The bike gets a slightly higher top speed. It goes 58 miles per hour on petrol, but range is only about 80 miles, which actually sounds rather a lot to me on 2 litres of fuel. I would have expected 2 litres of fuel to take you probably about, having a guess, say 60 odd miles. I think that probably sounds more reasonable. Anyway, something I haven't seen mentioned anywhere else in these reviews of this bike. Who is going to actually maintain the motorcycle? It's a high pressure gas system, and I really don't want to sit on a bike with a high pressure leak of flammable gas spraying between my legs, where there's a hot internal combustion engine. That's one of my fears, that they may end up not being particularly safe if they're not maintained well. Anyway, the rest of the bike's pretty basic stuffs, which accounts for the modest price. But I have seen a few articles written about this, claiming that it's a sort of yet another electric bike killer. Is it going to happen? Well, I very much doubt it. You know, as we said, CNG can certainly power city centre buses and trucks, and you can get away with it in a commuter motorcycle like this. But the idea that it's some kind of wonder fuel that can deliver the magic 200 formula, that's 200 kilometers of range on a bike weighing 200 kilograms, and delivering a 200 kilometer per hour top speed when you want it, all at the same time, seems highly unlikely. Now, you don't get anything for nothing, and if upscaling from 9 horsepower to 90 horsepower halves the per litre range, then it would require the capacity of the tank to double, even to maintain the modest 60 mile per hour range. I can't remember the mathematical formula for calculating the volume of a cylinder to contain gas, but obviously the cylinder would have to get bigger too. And it's hard to see how you can fit much bigger a cylinder over the top of an internal combustion engine on a bike. If you want to read the reference to the technology study that I was talking about earlier, you can find it here. So go and have a look, and that'll tell you everything that the UN has to say about compressed natural gas as a fuel. Right, that pretty much brings us to the end of today's show. Now, a quick shout out to my coffee supporters. As usual, who are they? Yes, Clive, Paul, Brian, Christine, and Anonymous. So thanks to all you. You're my regular supporters there, but a very special thanks, as I say, to the one-off, incredibly generous help to meet the expenses for that upcoming meeting with the IJMS conference. Paul, Damo, Mad Cockney, Malt, Duncan, John, Kevin, and Anonymous. So thank you again. And of course, if you do want to get your name in lights up here, all you have to do is support me on Ko-fi. And if you do, remember there are upwards of 1,000 better biking articles to read over there. So that's it for today. Don't forget, 11 o'clock Wednesday, Elevenses will be back, but it will be a recording. I'll be recording it on Tuesday evening. And I'm glad to see that it seems to have worked back on Facebook. I can see that my own post has just gone up there. So that's it for today. Thank you very much indeed for watching once more. Always interested to see what you have to say about these shows. Do drop me a line if you've got any comments on any of the stories. Yeah, Wednesday 11, but it will be a recorded show. And if you're out there on your bike enjoying the ride today, remember the weather is going to be a pretty fine day, I think. So have fun and stay shiny side up. And I'll see you for the next show.